couple of weeks ago, I made this router tool holder to go on the French cleats on the wall behind me. And I made it out of scrap MDF to prove whether the design, the sizes and the ideas would work. There were a couple of primary objectives. One, to allow me to leave the router bit in all the time. And two, to be able to just drop the cable in behind out the way and not have to wrap around the body and not have it looking untidy and hanging around the place and becoming a hazard. And it's achieved all of those. I'm really happy with the design. So now it's time to make it out as something a little bit more appropriate and put a bit more thought and a bit more effort into making it. So I'm going to use 12mm ply, no screws. I'm going to go with housing joints. So why 12mm ply and not 18mm? I don't need 18mm. It's overkill for the application. 12mm is more than strong enough to support the weight of the tool that I'm going to be putting on the holder. And 12mm is going to look better. This 18mm MDF looks far too chunky. I'm not going to use screws because in 12mm I'm going to have to use a very small screw, a number 3, 3.5 maybe. And I just don't want the screws in the side, and I don't need the screws in the side. If I use housing joints and glue, it keeps everything nice and simple. And it means that this is almost completely a router table project, apart from the wee curve, which is going to need a bandsaw or a jigsaw. So I'm going to cut the housing 12mm in from the back and 12mm up from the bottom. By setting it 12mm in from the back and using 12mm ply, all I've got to do is place a false piece on the back, and then I'm ready to put my hanger on the back. And seeing as it's going to be set at 12mm, I'm going to leave it at 12mm, so I've only got one setup to perform on the router table to be able to do the back and the base. The false back, I'm going to have to reset the fence on the router table, but again, that's just the one operation, and essentially my holder's cut. The only other thing that I need to take into account is if I'm going to set this panel and this panel into the size in a housing joint, then I either need to make these wider or just accept the fact that it'll be X narrower. Now I'm going to make my housing joints 4mm deep, so that means this will be 8mm narrower, and I'm absolutely fine with that. I don't think that's going to hinder me at all. So I'll take this apart and lay out the parts on a piece of ply. So looking at the size of this piece of leftover ply that I've got, and also knowing that I want to make 3 of these holders, the best approach seems to me to be if I cut 3 sets of sides out of this piece, there'll be a minimal wastage strip on the bottom, and then as these pieces are all the same off the end of a sheet, I can cut a 1200mm piece out or 2 1200mm pieces and get these 3 bits, 9 bits out of 2 cuts off the end of the sheet. Does that make sense? You'll have to imagine me cutting these to size on the table saw, because apparently I forgot to press the play button on the camera. Anyway, there are now 3 pieces from the one with a bit of spare. So I'm going to use one of the original sides to trace around and then rough cut the shapes out on the bandsaw. So that's my 6 sides rough cut to shape, and now I need to cut them to the exact shape, nice and smooth. And I've got my template from a previous piece that I cut. I did the MDF. Now I could get the masking tape out and stick bits of masking tape to this and to that and the super glue and the activator, but really, come on, tedious beyond belief. So I knocked up a little jig to use at the router table. Simplicity itself, using this Microfit kit, which is just superb. You got to try it out. The dovetail jig kit that keeps on giving. So a couple of dovetail routs in there, 2 bits for a fence, then the clamps slip in underneath, and hey presto, no masking tape and glue required. So I take my piece, pop it in there, take my template, pop it on top. Everything's in the right place because it's all up against the fence. Clamp down. And away we go. Well, that was an absolute joy. No tape, no super glue. And in total, all 6 took, what, 5-6 minutes. A breeze. Okay, with all my side bits done, all I need to do now is cut the back, the false back, and the base. And I've just remembered that these shelves here are no longer going to be of use. I'm replacing them. So I'm going to take them apart and use that ply for these pieces because I can't abide or afford wastage. So now it's just a case of laying out all my parts to make best use of the timber that I've got. So I need 3 bags, and I can get a back out of each one of those pieces. So that's 2. I can get a back out of there, 3. So that's the 3 backs done. And I want 3 of each of these. So I can get 2 of those there, 2 of those there. And those 2 pieces will give me 2 more. So I'm quids in, and I've still got a side piece left for another project. So I'll run these pieces through on the table saw, and then it's time for the housings. So that's all my pieces cut, and I'm ready to rate the housings. So the important part now is to make sure I pair the sides and mark them appropriately so that I don't cut 4 lefts and 2 rights. So I'm just going to lay them out, making sure I don't leave any nasty bits from previous projects on the outsides. I've got a straight bit set up in the router table at 4mm high, and I've got my fence set back so that the rebate I cut leaves me 12mm at the back so that I can take a piece of waste and place it underneath the rail part of the French cleat, and everything will be nice and secure. There's my test cut. Piece fits great. So I take each cheek, pass it across to cut the back, and then pass it across to cut the bottom. And once I've cut all of those, then I can reset the fence to cut the false back. So that's the back and the base cuts done. And now I've got to do the false back. Now the false back is a stopped cut, so there's an added layer of detail complexity with it, but not very much. But the two sides need to be cut differently. So on one side, I need to put my piece up against a fence stop, push down and cut all the way through. But on the other piece, I need to do it the other way. I need to start up against the fence and then push up to a stop, because the false back stops short of the top. So in order to work out where to set my fence, I've taken one of my base pieces and one of my false back pieces, and I've made a mark, a 12mm down from the top of the false back. Then I've squared it around the board so that I can see where it's to, and I'm setting my mark to the center of my bit. I've got a 12mm bit and I've set that 12mm down, bearing in mind that the top of that router cut is going to leave a curve at the top of the rebate, which I don't want to have to deal with. So by setting the center 12mm down, I've got enough room if I cut a little wee shoulder on the top of the false backboard at 12mm down. So 6 tiny little cuts to make. Which I could cut with a handsaw. Or I could be really lazy and cut them all on the bandsaw. And the final cut to make before I look at dry assembly is the slot to allow the router bit to remain projected past the bottom of the router base. I could do that in a multitude of ways as well. I could set a larger bit in the router table and make multiple passes, adjusting the height so I don't take out too much. But then I'd have to sand the bottom out with spindle sander, or even worse, shock horror with a rasp. So I don't want to do that. I could use a jigsaw and then clean it up with a spindle sander and a rasp. Shock horror, don't want to do that. Or I could take the easy way out and use an appropriately sized bit in my drill press to drill the hole. And then the bandsaw to make the hole a slot. So I thought to myself, it's time for a quick dry assembly to make sure everything's going to plan. I got everything together and I'm stood there feeling really pleased with myself when I realise I've made a gargantuan mistake. When I set the depth for the false back, I measured 60mm from the back of the side cheek, not 60mm from the front of the now inset back, if you follow. So my false back piece is too close to the back. It's no longer big enough to take the plug. Which means I either have to recut all the side cheeks and throw these pieces away, or I reset the router bit forward to the correct place, 60mm from the front of this rebate, and accept the fact that this channel is going to be there, but at least it's going to be hidden. So back to the router table. Dry assembly take 2. So one back panel. One Fultz back. One base. That looks a little better from a plug perspective. Really disappointed about that, but it is going to be hidden. So well, apart from the fact that's back to front, all looks pretty good. So now I'm thinking, what about a round over? Well, I'd like a round over there and across the front and around the sides. The 2 outside parts I can do with ease once it's together. That I can do before I assemble. I'll have to do that after assembly, but this inside I can't do after assembly, so I'll have to do that before assembly. So a final dry fit, just to make sure I've got everything rounded that I need rounded. Back, base, Fultz base, making sure I choose the correct slot. So the insides are rounded, that piece is rounded. This bit I can get to afterwards, these I can get to afterwards, and that I can get to afterwards. So the dry fit's good, the assembly's good. How am I going to clamp it and keep it square? So I'm thinking 3, maybe 4 quick clamps. Solid enough. Is it square? It sure is, Ollie. In which case, without further ado, let's get the glue. Well, my 3 little holders are out the clamps and ready for the final stage. But while I was gluing these up, I realised I needed a 4th for the OF 1400, but without a back. So I threw one of those in as well for good measure. Last little job then, to glue the little pieces on the back to fill in for this 12mm rebate. So I've cut some little bits of scrap ply and I'm just going to put a smear of glue on there. Pop it in and hope that it holds itself in place while I put another smear of glue on the rail portion of the cleat. Pop that on top. Just making sure they're perfectly flush with the top, otherwise they're all gonna sit askew and that would be damn annoying. So it's tomorrow. The glue's dry. And it's time for a bit of finish. So is it really worth putting finish on these, I hear you say? Well, I think so. What I'm concerned about is with taking the tool off and putting the tool back on again so frequently that I'm going to, one, damage the surface, but what I'm really worried about is putting digs and splintering on the front edges, and the finish will help to prevent that, especially this finish. This is Polyvine's heavy duty floor varnish. I know, floor varnish, but extremely hard wearing if you think about the job that floor varnish has got to do, protect against all those feet everywhere and those hobnail boots. And I've used it in so many applications over the years, on doors and even on chairs, and it's just beautiful. A lovely satin finish, very easy to apply. I'm going to put the first coat on with a cloth thinned by 50% with water, and then the second coat not thinned, but again with the cloth. My finish is finally dry and they're ready to go into use. I have no idea if they're going to stay here, but it does feel like a good place at the moment. But then the beauty of the French cleat system, I can come out in the morning and think, I'll move you. Nice and neat. If I was a palm rater, I'd be in 7th heaven right now. And I must admit, I feel more than a little pleased with myself. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Ta-ra.